Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be one of the guys sharing their stories here, but here we are. Sit tight, this one is messy. What would you do if the person you loved for 20 years betrayed you with someone you trusted? I never thought I'd have to face that question, until I did. My name's Michael, I'm 48, and I've spent most of my life working as a high school teacher. I always thought I had a strong marriage with my wife, Sarah. We'd been together since our early 20s, raised 2 kids, and built a life I was proud of. But 2 months ago, everything came crashing down. I found out that Sarah had been having an affair. And the worst part, it wasn't with a stranger. It was with someone I'd trusted, someone close to me, my best friend, Mark. Shock, anger, numb. It started as a typical Friday. I came home from work around 5:30, exhausted from the long week. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner, and everything seemed normal. But that's the thing about trust, you don't question normal. You don't question your routine. You don't think, today's the day I'm going to lose everything. I remember sitting down at the table, scrolling through my phone to unwind. Then a message popped up. It was from someone anonymous, no name, just a number I didn't recognize. The message said, "Your wife and Mark. Ask her." I stared at it. Confusion. My mind immediately jumped to a misunderstanding, maybe a joke. But something didn't sit right. Mark had been my best friend since college. We'd been through everything together, birthdays, holidays, even his own divorce. He'd been the godfather to my kids. So why this message? Why him? I got up, walked over to Sarah, and without thinking much, I asked, "What's going on with you and Mark?" Just like that. No accusation, no anger, just confusion. Her reaction was the first clue that something was wrong. She froze. Her face drained of color. Then, she looked away. Guilt. That one look said everything. I didn't need her to answer. I knew. My heart felt like it stopped. I don't remember how long I stood there, just staring at her. A minute. 10 minutes. It's a blur. All I could manage to say was, "How long?" She didn't deny it. Didn't try to lie. That's what hit the hardest, I think, the lack of fight. She simply said, "A year." A year. For 12 months, the woman I'd shared my life with, the mother of my children, had been sneaking around behind my back with someone I trusted more than anyone. The shock of it was like being hit with a brick, sudden, painful, and heavy. I couldn't speak. I couldn't yell. I couldn't cry. Nothing came out. I just shut down. Numb. I didn't know how to process it. My mind raced with images of them together, of all the times I was oblivious, blind to what was happening right under my nose. I thought about the dinners we'd had with Mark, the nights we'd hung out as friends, the times he'd been around my kids. All of it felt like a lie. The betrayal was deeper than the act itself. It was the erosion of everything I believed in, my marriage, my friendship, my trust. I thought back to the last year, trying to pinpoint any moment where I might have sensed something, any sign I'd missed. But nothing stood out. She'd been careful. He'd been careful. I asked why. It felt like the only question left that I could still control. Why him? Why now? Her answer. I don't know. Frustration. That's what I was left with, an affair that lasted a year, no clear reason, and 2 people who I thought I knew betraying me. The rest of that evening was a blur. I remember her crying, trying to explain herself, but it was all noise to me. I wasn't listening. I couldn't. The house felt like a stranger's place. The woman I loved felt like a stranger. Mark, my best friend, had turned into someone I hated. That night, I packed a bag and left. Alone. After I left the house that night, I didn't really have a plan. I just drove. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, they ached, but I didn't notice at first. I wasn't thinking clearly, I couldn't. All I knew was that I needed to be away. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of a hotel, the same hotel Sarah and I had stayed at for our 10th anniversary. Irony. I checked in, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall. The silence in that room was loud. It echoed. I could hear every thought bouncing around in my head, but none of them made sense. The betrayal felt too big, too heavy to hold in my mind all at once. I kept going back to Mark. Mark. Of all people, why him? The guy who had been there through everything. We had shared so much over the years, personal struggles, work problems, and even things Sarah didn't know. We'd always had each other's backs. Now, all of that felt like a lie. It was hard to reconcile the guy the first knew with the guy who would do this. I remembered the times he'd come over for dinner, the way he'd laugh with the kids, how Sarah had always seemed comfortable around him. I never thought anything of it. Why would I? They were just friends. Trust. I trusted him like family. Maybe even more than some family. And that's what hurt the most. The betrayal wasn't just about the physical affair. It was the emotional breach. It was knowing that while I was confiding in him about life, he was betraying me behind my back. It wasn't just one lie, it was a year of lies. A year of pretending everything was fine. I tried to think back to any sign, anything that might have tipped me off, but there was nothing. They'd hidden it well, maybe too well. I wondered if they had ever felt guilty. Did they laugh at me behind my back? Was I a joke to them? Humiliation. I stayed in that hotel room for 3 nights. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't eat much. Just sat there, trying to piece it all together. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see them together. It wasn't even real images, just my mind filling in the gaps, tormenting me with every possible scenario. Disgust. By the 4th day, I knew I had to go back home. I couldn't hide forever. There were things to deal with, decisions to make. I wasn't ready to talk to Sarah yet, but we still had responsibilities, bills, the kids, life. It didn't just stop because my marriage did. I walked through the door, and the house felt different. Quieter, emptier. Sarah was sitting on the couch, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked broken, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I didn't say much, just grabbed a few more clothes, and told her I'd be staying somewhere else for a while. She didn't argue, didn't ask questions. She just nodded. We didn't speak much over the next few days. I think we were both too exhausted. Avoidance. Mark called a few times. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had no idea what I'd even say to him if I picked up. What do you say to someone who's destroyed your life? How do you even begin to have that conversation? Rage. I spent those next few weeks in a fog. I went to work, kept busy with the kids when I could, but the weight of everything never left me. It sat on my chest every night when I lay down to sleep, a constant reminder that my life was no longer what it used to be. The questions kept spinning in my head. Why did they do it? Was I not enough? Had I missed something? Doubt. Sarah tried talking a few times, but every conversation was the same. She'd start with an apology, then try to explain herself, but it never made sense. Nothing she said could fix what happened. The damage was done. There was no excuse that could erase the fact that she had chosen him, my best friend, over me. Betrayal. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, she asked me what I wanted to do next. Divorce was on the table, obviously. She wasn't fighting it, but I think deep down, she wanted to believe we could somehow work through it. Hope. But I didn't have any hope left. Not for us. I told her I didn't see a future together, and that's when the reality of it hit her. I watched as her face crumpled, but it didn't move me. I didn't feel anything. I was numb. The decision had been made. Finality. The hardest part wasn't leaving Sarah, it was explaining to the kids. They were old enough to understand that something was wrong but too young to fully grasp the depth of it. We told them we were separating, and I could see the confusion in their eyes, the fear. I wanted to shield them from all of this, but there was no way to protect them from the truth. Guilt. Weeks turned into months, and life moved forward, even when it felt like it couldn't. I filed for divorce, we started the paperwork, and slowly, the reality of my marriage ending became just another fact of life. Empty. Mark. He was gone. I never spoke to him again. I didn't need to. Whatever friendship we had was dead, just like my marriage. It was a Sunday afternoon, about 3 months after I had filed for divorce. The papers were still sitting on Sarah's desk, unsigned, like some kind of silent, looming presence in the house. She wasn't avoiding it, not exactly, more like she was holding onto the last threads of whatever we used to have. I knew that. But the truth is, I was done waiting. We had been dragging this out long enough. That day, we were both home. The kids were out with friends, so it was just the two of us in the quiet house. I remember sitting at the dining room table, flipping through some old bills, not really paying attention to anything. Sarah walked in and stood there for a moment, looking at me like she wanted to say something. But the silence stretched on, filling the room with an almost unbearable tension. Finally, she broke the silence. Can we talk? I didn't look up. I didn't want to. I knew what she wanted to talk about, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. Reluctance. I don't know what you want me to say, I replied, my voice low, flat. I was tired, emotionally, mentally, just tired of it all. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, resting her hands on the table like she was trying to ground herself. I've been thinking about everything. About us. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how to. There wasn't much left to say. We'd been over this before, countless times, and nothing ever changed. Silence. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I just got lost. Things with Mark, I don't even know why it happened. That word again. Why? She had no answers then, and she had none now. I'd heard it so many times that it had become meaningless to me. Frustration. I know you're angry, she continued. I know I ruined everything. But, maybe there's still something left to save. That's when I looked at her, really looked at her. She was holding on to hope, clinging to some idea that we could patch things up, that we could somehow go back to the way things were. And for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I thought about everything. The lies. The affair. The fact that for an entire year, she had looked me in the eye and pretended nothing was wrong while sneaking around with Mark behind my back. Betrayal. There's nothing left, Sarah, I said, my voice steady, but cold. Whatever we had, it's gone. You killed it. She flinched, like my words had physically hit her, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. You didn't just cheat on me, I continued, my voice rising slightly. You destroyed the trust I had in you. You destroyed my trust in him. Do you even understand what that did to me? To us. She tried to speak, but I didn't give her a chance. You and Mark didn't just have an affair. You made me question everything. Every memory, every moment we shared. Was it all a lie? Regret. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but it didn't affect me like it used to. I'd seen her cry before, and I'd felt sympathy, sadness. But this time, I felt nothing. Numb. I'm done, I said firmly. I can't keep pretending like we can fix this. You need to sign the papers. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I waited for her to say something, anything, that would change how I felt, but she didn't. She just sat there, broken. I stood up, pushing the chair back with a loud scrape against the floor. This is over. It's been over for a long time. You need to accept that. Acceptance. And that was it. The moment I walked away from the table, I knew it was final. The weight of it all hit me, but not in the way I expected. I didn't feel anger or sadness. I didn't feel relieved, either. I just felt done. Closure. The next day, she signed the divorce papers. There was no more conversation, no more pleas to work things out. She knew it was over. And so did I. Finality. Looking back on everything that happened, I've realized that betrayal isn't just about the affair itself. It's about the ripple effects it creates in every corner of your life. The lies, the broken trust, the way you start questioning everything you thought was real, it changes you in ways you don't even see coming. I didn't just lose Sarah as my wife, I lost the life we had built together over 20 years. Our marriage was woven into every part of my identity, from the little everyday routines to the big milestones we celebrated as a family. And when it unraveled, so did a part of me. But as much as I wish things had been different, I've come to understand that sometimes, you can't go back. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. No matter how much time passes, the trust is gone. And without trust, there's no foundation for anything else. It wasn't an easy process, accepting the end of my marriage. There were days when I second-guessed myself, wondering if I had made the right decision. I thought about whether I could have handled things differently, if I should have tried harder, fought more to save what we had. But in the end, the truth was simple. Sarah made a choice, and that choice destroyed us. No amount of effort or therapy would have undone the damage that was done. The hardest part wasn't signing the divorce papers or even the endless discussions about custody and finances. It was the emotional toll, the quiet moments when the house felt emptier, or when the kids asked why things couldn't go back to the way they used to be. Those were the moments that weighed the heaviest. And yet, I knew that staying together, just for the sake of the past, would have been a bigger lie than anything Sarah had done. Over time, I've learned to forgive, not for Sarah's sake, but for my own. Holding onto that anger and hurt would have eaten me alive. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean reconciliation. It just means letting go of the weight that betrayal leaves behind, so you can start to move forward. If there's anything I've taken from this, it's that sometimes, letting go is the most powerful thing you can do. I had to let go of the life I thought I'd have, the marriage I believed was unbreakable, and the person I trusted most. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But with time, I've found a new sense of peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because I've accepted that it's okay to let go of what no longer serves you. I won't pretend that everything is neatly wrapped up now. Life after betrayal is messy, full of ups and downs, and it's a constant process of healing. But I can honestly say that I'm in a better place now. I've learned more about myself in the aftermath than I ever did during those 20 years of marriage. I've learned what I need, what I deserve, and, most importantly, that my worth isn't tied to someone else's choices. There are still scars, of course. How could there not be? But scars don't define you, they just remind you of where you've been and how far you've come. And now, as I look to the future, I know that whatever comes next, I'll face it with the knowledge that I've survived one of the hardest chapters of my life. In the end, I didn't just end a marriage, I started a new chapter for myself. One where I get to decide what happiness looks like for me. And that's something no betrayal can take away.